This is ESBR Boxing. Delighted to be joined in Belfast by Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie, when was the last time you were here? Have you been to Belfast before? What are your thoughts so far?
No, yeah, I've never been to Belfast before. I've been to Dublin many years ago, but not Belfast, no.
Well, you're very much welcome. ProBox TV, obviously, on the road in Belfast for Friday night show. And as you went on a bit of a rant during the press conference. I'd love to see that. So tell us a bit about what ProBox TV and why you're teaming up with Conlon Boxing.
Well, that's what ProBox TV stands for. That's why I was trying to kind of go on that rant, is because I think we need more regular thing. This has to be more regular, but in order for it to be more regular, fighters can't be punished for fighting tough fights, then losing them if they lose them competitively. So I think if the fans want to see fights constantly being made that are competitive, good fights, good shootouts, I think you can't punish guys that lose in those good fights, and I think that's become sort of the thing that happens to guys that get beat in those kind of good fights, is that they get punished too much, so it ends up becoming that the risk is not worth the reward of taking those tough fights. So guys try to nurture their records and pad their records. Then you got these idiots in the media creating these pound for pound lists where really it just only pushes more to not get beat, because then you want to wind up on that pound for pound list, because then you can use that as a negotiating chip as well. So all that does is just hurt things more, So I really think that there needs to be a change of mindset. There used to be the way old school boxing was, and it was the glory days of boxing. That's not a coincidence, where when guys took losses and yet still were championship level fighters and would win and then get beat again with championship level fighters, because they fought more regularly, they fought constantly against great opposition, and people were entertained by the sport, and I think that's the bottom line. You need to get these kind of fighters out that look to pad up their record, and their fans as well. They got to go too. These hero worshipping fans who don't care who their favorite fighter fights, as long as they see their favorite fighter wins, you can fight a kitchen worker. Those fans got to go too. We need a set of fans that want to see the best fight the best. We need to see fighters that want to fight the best fighters, and we need the business of it, boxing itself, to continue to nurture that and not punish guys who lose competitively against top fighters.
And do you think through ProBox TV, yourself and Chris, as you mentioned as well, the Riyadh season, that could slowly begin to happen more frequently?
I think it's been a subtle change at the grooming level, which is ProBox. ProBox is sort of like the grooming level for championship boxing, right? It's just below that, so it's a solid level. It's also where the majority of boxing lives. It's basically the middle class of the boxing world. That grooming level to the championship level, and then you've got the championship level, where I think Riyadh season has done a great job as well. And I think the proof of that is, if you look at the odds makers, what they've done with Riyadh season, what they've done on ProBox TV, there's been a lot of upsets on these cards. Many upsets on ProBox TV and many upsets on Riyadh season. So that goes to show you that these fights are so competitive that the odds makers are getting really, really confused. They don't know how to make odds anymore. It used to be very easy in boxing to make odds. You would have guys like Canelo being minus 1,000 favorites in pay-per-view main events. People don't get disgusted by that. You got to pay for a pay-per-view where the main event odds are minus 1,500. That doesn't offend you, So that doesn't offend the fighter himself that he's doing that to people, So for me, that was sort of starting to become the norm for a little while, So we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to go back to those old days where everybody wanted to fight each other. We see the Eastern fighters doing that. We need to see the Western fighters doing that more. And some Western fighters do that. There's guys from Mexico, not named Canelo, who do that. There's guys. There's Terence Crawford. I felt they did that for a big part of his career as well. Constantly chased the best fighters possible, even though it wasn't always easy for him to get them. When they were available, he constantly did fight them. I think, if you make that the regular norm, you're going to start to get that changeover. If you don't, you're going to risk the Eastern fighters starting to notice and starting to copy the Western fighters. Right now they still have that Soviet communist mentality. They're still fresh. It's only a few decades after, so they still have that built-in be the best money secondary. Money, I'm not saying money has to be secondary necessarily, but when you fight the best and you can perform at that level, if you're not punished so much for losing at that level and you fight competitively, you're able to stay there, then it's not such a bad thing to constantly fight the best fighters for you, because the risk is worth the reward. The juice is worth the squeeze. And I think that's where the business sort of has to change over as well. You can't punish these guys. And I think that's where Riyadh season and ProBox TV have done a good job. We brought back guys. You see Robbie's on this ProBox show now. He lost a very good fight on ProBox. But he fought a very good fight, so he's back. And in Riyadh season, you saw Jerome Miller, get beat by Dubois, came back and put in a good performance against Andy Ruiz. So when these guys are of a level, just because they get beat, you notice that they're still of a level, because when you bring them back, they'll perform. And after you've seen that, they shouldn't be punished the way they get thrown out completely, And so, you can't do that. It's tough. Like look at like I mentioned, Madrimov and Boachuk, they're gonna fight each other. The loser's gonna have 2 losses in a row. But yet, if the loser gets 2 losses in a row and he's in another war, another competitive fight, he's in another tough fight, you're gonna punish that guy for having 2 losses in a row? The idiot fan or the average idiot media pundit will say, "Oh, he's got 2 losses in a row. Where's he going?" The educated eye, though, will tell you why. That guy still deserves to be among the best. He deserves a big fight because he shouldn't be punished for going after the best and losing close fights against the best. So you need to change the mindset, a little bit of within the business, the way money's changed when it comes to guys getting beat in good fights. They need to still be rewarded. They need to be, pushed into, continuing to want to better themselves as fighters, And if you do that, man, and you're not punished financially, then you know what? The fans are going to benefit from it because then they're going to constantly get better fights. Fighters aren't going to be as apprehensive to do it. And you need to eliminate those fighters that are trying to pad it up. You need to eliminate their fans because I think the fan that loves that kind of stuff is the worst kind of fan for the sport. So they got to go too. And if you do that, you'll get kind of a changeover in the mental makeup of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed we see the biggest and best fights more often. The best.
You can only do that with if the movement, people get behind the movement. That's why I tell people download the ProBox TV app. We'll put those fights on at the level we put fights on. Which is that grooming middle class level. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to rant about it on our TV talk shows that we have every day about the championship level. Also needed to do that. And yes, we've been sometimes critical of Riyadh season, but we're also praiseworthy. Riyadh season has a lot of things that are praiseworthy as well, and that's one of the things that are praiseworthy. So I really feel like that, especially right there, those are 2 things that we have in common with the Riyadh season, and that we're making the fights. And you look at the odds makers; they don't know how to make odds for our shows. Everybody else, you sit to see the odds get made, but they don't know how to make odds for our shows because there's constantly both sides, A and B sides, are constantly winning.
You mentioned Canelo there a couple of times. There was reports coming out the other day that Chris Eubank Jr.'s promoter Ben Shalom said that those conversations are beginning. Is that a fight that you as a fan would want to see, or is this a fight where you think that it is a clear A side and B side that you don't want to see?
I mean, Eubank's a middleweight, really, right? I mean, he's he's not really a super middleweight at this point. He's gotten hurt. He lost to Liam Smith a couple of fights ago. He came back. He did well. Nah, man. I mean, that's. What are the odds for that fight? What do you think the odds are? Minus 1,000? They're minus 1,000 odds, right? So you really need to see that. Do I really need to see a pay-per-view main event that's with minus 1,000 odds? I don't need to see that. I don't need to buy that. You know what I mean? Like, nobody should buy that. Nobody should talk about that. And you know what? I don't even mind Canelo doing this because he's done so much for the sport. If he wouldn't take the titles with him, if he would have the dignity to vacate the titles, I wouldn't have a problem with it because I said, you know what, this guy's done a lot for the sport. Like Chavez Sr., who you see as Chavez, went on a retirement tour at the end of his career. You know what I mean? And he didn't take the titles with him. He waited to lose the titles first against Oscar De La Hoya, and then he said, okay, I'm going to go on this little retirement tour. Still generated a lot of fanfare, still generated a lot of hype, and kept his respect. Decades later, people still respect Chavez for that. This is undignified what this guy's doing, to do it that way. Like you're taking the titles with you. I have no problem if you want to go on a world tour and fight Eubank in England and fight Joe Schmo in Japan and fight Belanga in Vegas. No problem. Belanga, who didn't even try to win the fight, mind you. He just fought to survive. He didn't try to win the fight once. I don't know if anybody else noticed it. That guy didn't try to win the fight, And I like Edgar. He's going to be what he's going to be, though. You can't fault Edgar for it. That's who he is, But you can fault Canelo for taking that fight as a champion when there's other fighters he should be fighting. So, in a title fight sense, yeah, it's very undignified. But that's what I'm saying about you got to get the fans out too. Because there's a lot of fans that defend that. So they got to go too. If you're gonna better the sport of boxing, fighters like that have to go, and fans like that have to go too. They got to go watch MMA, or they got to go watch golf, or whatever they got to watch. They can't be watching boxing and putting their 2 cents into the mix. Because the sport has to have that changeover, and it's not gonna do that with people like this around.
One fight that there isn't a clear A and B side, and who's going to win will be the rematch between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk.
That's also an example of what happens when you make a clear 1 versus 2. You make, you can make 1 versus 4, good fights. It's respectable, but it's not going to be that kind of. You kind of know who's going to win. You can make a 2 versus 7. Boxing loves to do those kind of fights. But when it's a clear 1 versus 2, think about it. Like Javante and Shakur in the lightweight division. You really, there's debates on both sides. Usyk versus Fury, there was debates on both sides, so you saw the fight. They also tend to live up to the hype. They tend to live up to the hype when you make those fights. And you look at Riyadh season and ProBox are also an example of that. We make the best fights possible for our level. Riyadh season makes the best fights possible for their level. And there's constantly, you can't really see who's going to win. The odds makers are confused. You get great fights out of it. You get entertaining fights out of it. And so Usyk Fury was one of those fights. 1 versus 2, and you saw that it lived up to the hype because it's a clear 1 versus 2. Everybody knew they were the 1 and 2 guys. So when you make those 2 guys fight each other, you're going to get a good fight.
That's a 1 versus 2. People maybe had Dubois and Joshua. Well, Joshua was 3 beforehand.
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
want to
I'm
see
talking
that?
about when they fought. When they fought, they were clear 1 and 2. You know, now of course things are to change because Fury took a loss. Maybe you drop down to 3-4. Okay, whatever. But you know what? The rematch is a necessity because it was very competitive. It was a very good fight. So no problem doing it. In the meantime, Dubois can keep anchoring himself. Listen, Fabio Wardley and Dubois is not something I'm not going to complain about. Listen, that's a shootout in itself. That's can you really think of Usyk and Fury that's a guaranteed winner in the rematch? I can't. I can tell you I'll maybe angle it towards Usyk a little bit because I'm not sure Tyson Fury's the same guy mentally. And he has the same passion for the sport anymore. But if he does, I would favor Fury. I'm just not a mind reader, and something to predict. But the fact that I have to go that deep into thinking about it means it's still a good fight.
Obviously, talk now just finally, Paulie, of Daniel Dubois maybe fighting Joseph Parker or Fabio Wardley, as mentioned, instead of the rematch with Joshua. Do you think if you were on Joshua's team, do you think that's the right decision to not take that immediate rematch?
I don't think Joshua should take that rematch. I think when you're late in your career, sometimes you want to convince yourself that you still want to do this. And when your belly's full and you get that phone call in your house and your nice, comfortable couch, and you say, I could do that. And you start to imagine the big crowd, you start to imagine the big lights. But I can do that again. And they still want me. They're calling me for it. That's what was going through my mind lately. They still. But then you get there and you're like, man, you feel a little bit heat because now you're not the same fighter. So you're going to question yourself. And I felt like Joshua wanted to be there. He wanted to get himself there where he's always been. But I don't know if he's the same guy physically and mentally. And it's up to him, man. It's a difficult. That's a difficult part of your life, man. That's a really difficult decision to make, man. I think Joshua is always going to have a standing in boxing where he can be a pundit, he can be whatever. He's always going to be in demand. But we crave that. We crave that fight. And to say it's gone forever, it's a difficult thing to part with at that moment.
Well, I'll not take up any more of your time. Paulie Malignaggi, thanks very much for talking to ESBR Boxing, and most importantly, enjoy the rest of your time in Belfast.
I will. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paulie.